March rolls around, and I said to Toby, something's really wrong here. There are nomination meetings happening elsewhere in the province, and we're still being told no. And the PC party and lots of other folks underestimated myself. They underestimated the power that Toby held here. And the Premier coming in and appointing someone that they didn't approve of was a no-go zone. I think that this is a blessing in disguise, because Haldimand Norfolk can go to Queen's Park and we can vote, we can debate, we can ask questions for the good of the people here, not for the good of a party.
David Menzies for Rebel News here in Haldimand, Norfolk County, and I'm with the independent MPP for this riding. That would be Bobbi Ann Brady. And I know what you're thinking, folks. An independent got in last year during the so-called blue tsunami. Oh, indeed she did. And what a story it is. Well, Ms. Brady, I want to thank you, first of all, for making time to speak with us. And it really is an incredible story how you ended up being the MPP, an independent MPP, I should stress, for this riding. Can you give us some background in terms of how it unfolded that you went on to run as an independent in the first place? I know the former MPP, Toby Barrett, held the riding since 1995, I believe. You were to be the heir apparent, but I believe Doug Ford had other ideas.
Yes, Toby had been the MPP for 27 years. Of those 27 years, I had worked for MPP Barrett for 23. And so I had, a relationship with most people across both counties, Haldimand and Norfolk. And I was the local PC Riding Association for over 20 years, which is unheard of as well. I think that breaks the Constitution, but, there weren't very many people who wanted to step forward and take on that role. So I was the president for over 20 years. So I had a very strong relationship with local Conservatives and other folks in the community movers and shakers. And so it started in January 2022. It was no secret to the Premier's office that Toby was retiring. In fact, in 2018, Toby had gone to the Premier's office in his little sit down after the election, and he said, "This is my last run. I want to keep it confidential, but I will not be seeking re-election in 2022. So it wasn't a shock to them that they needed to take steps in Haldimand, Norfolk to, find a successor for Toby Barrett. So January 2022, I start going to the party brass and I said, look, we need to start thinking about a nomination night. And I was told, we have to hold off. COVID. They used COVID as the reason. So I said, okay, fine. February rolls around and I know that there are, actions being taken elsewhere. I'm thinking this is a bit odd. March rolls around and I said to Toby, something's really wrong here. There are nomination meetings happening elsewhere in the province and we're still being told no. And it was April 9th of last year when the Premier finally called Toby and he said, I will be appointing the mayor of Haldimand County as the candidate for the PCs.
And by the way, can you give us an idea, Ms. Brady, the unspoken strategy for that? Because as you said, Toby Barrett held the riding for 27 years. I mean, what an incredible winning streak. You are a loyal PC soldier and a very successful one. You were to be the heir apparent, and then you're getting the silent treatment, as you said, from the PC party brass. And then this other candidate is seen as the front runner. What was behind that?
I can't say for certain what was behind it, but I believe that there was at least one connection to the mayor of Haldimand County at the time, and I believe that connection convinced the Premier that this was the way to go. I don't know if you know about the proposed development at the Nanticoke Industrial Park. They want to build 15,000 homes at the Nanticoke Industrial Park, in and around the Nanticoke Industrial Park. And it's a contentious issue. 2 elections locally have now been won on that issue, mine and then the municipal election. And people do not want 15,000 homes built in and around an industrial park, and the major industry at the industrial park doesn't want 15,000 homes or 40,000 people showing up there either. They have said they'll pack their bags and they'll take their business elsewhere, and why wouldn't they? So I believe, if I had to guess, that would be the reason why they wanted this particular candidate. That mayor was part of the proposal at Nanticoke. He supported it.
Oh, okay.
And it's with Empire Homes. And so I was against the proposal. Toby Barrett was against the proposal. We still are. So if I had to hazard to guess, that would be it. But in hindsight, when everything unfolded the way it did, I actually got my hands on a brief that they did on me. The party conducted research on me, unknown to me. I mean, I wasn't a candidate. So they did this nice package, and they made a package look how they wanted it to look about Bobbi Ann Brady. I had been a loyal soldier to the party for 23 years. I ruined a lot of things in my life for these people. I traveled this province. I ruined vehicles. I spent time away from home, time away from my kids. I missed birthdays. I missed all sorts of functions. And I worked for free. I worked for free on weekends and nights, running nominations, running by-elections. I'm a bit of a GOTV, get out the vote expert. I went across the province working on campaigns to do GOTV, door knocked, every job. And yet there was no sense of loyalty to, a little soldier like Bobbi Ann Brady, or largely to Toby Barrett, who had given 27 years of his life representing the people of this riding. And he did a great job. He was the most fantastic mentor I could have. And yet they still didn't want to listen to Toby. When Toby said, Premier Ford, this is a bad idea. Mm-hmm. There was no listening to a man who had given 27 years of his life to the people of this area and to the party.
What about members of the Grassroots constituency, Ms. Brady? What kind of feedback were you getting when they heard that you weren't going to be the candidate for the PC party?
Well, that's interesting because the majority, the board kind of dissolved, and the majority of those folks, maybe the exception of one or two, didn't follow along, but they all came on board with us, and they said this is the way it's going to be. There were also folks, cadre of Liberals, cadre of NDP folks, who said, we know Bobbi Ann, and we know what a good job she's done. She's our girl. She's our local girl who fights for us, and it doesn't matter what stripe we are, but this isn't right. Yeah. And there were a cadre of Liberals and NDP who supported me because they said, you know what, she's going to represent us as the people, not a party.
That's fascinating that Liberals and NDP would be supportive of you and not the Premier. And, I told you off camera, last year we came to Port Dover. It was to cover the Friday the 13th ride, finally coming back after the COVID lockdowns. And I'm driving around and I see all these blue Brady signs, and they're everywhere in Port Dover. And I'm going, and I'm kicking myself because I thought I should track down this Brady person, find out what the deal is. And then I thought, it's an independent, that's a no-hoper, that's a Herculean task. But let's cut to the chase. Election day comes. You pulled it off.
It's always good to be underestimated. And, I've lived my life largely being underestimated. I played boys hockey from the time I was 6 until I was nearly 19, went right through body contact, everything else, tiny little thing. And it's always good to be underestimated. And the PC party and lots of other folks underestimated myself. They underestimated the power that Toby held here. And they underestimated the people of Haldimand, Norfolk. People here are different. They're very, very principled. They don't like being told what to do. And the Premier coming in and appointing someone that they didn't approve of was a no-go zone. And they proved the Premier and they proved others wrong. And they said, no, this is the person we're choosing. And it was one of the things when I decided to run, I remember going into Toby's office and because we were very perplexed as to how we were going to handle this. We knew it was wrong. And I said, if we don't stand up for democracy, who was going to? And, Toby said, I think you're crazy. He says, but I'm in. And I said, the people here are different. They're going to do what I felt was the right thing.
Unless things have changed, I was researching you going to Queen's Park, the legislature, and you made mention that many members of the PC caucus welcomed you warmly. But you're getting the silent treatment from Premier Ford. Is that still the case?
I wouldn't say I'm getting the silent treatment from the Premier anymore. I mean, I watched him closely while I was sitting in my chair for the first few months, and I would catch him, looking my way, and I'm not sure if he was trying to figure me out, but eventually he came around at Christmas. I had a little exchange with him, and recently I had a bit of an exchange with him on the grand staircase because one of my questions was bounced to him to answer, and he assured me he would take care of some things for my farmers, and anyway, it's been there hasn't been much, let's just say that, and that's fine. He hasn't been unkind to me. I don't think he knows who I am, and that's unfortunate. I think if he knew who I was ahead of time, I think his decision here in Haldimand, Norfolk would have been much different. That being said, we're in an area right now where we believe in blessings, and we also believe in blessings in disguise, and there's so much policy on the table now. There's so much policy right across North America that I would have a hard time standing behind if I was under, the thumb of a party. It would be very difficult for me. And I think that this is a blessing in disguise because Haldimand, Norfolk can go to Queen's Park and we can vote, we can debate, we can ask questions for the good of the people here, not for the good of a party.
One of the major planks going back to 2018 was to revamp the sex ed curriculum of the McGuinty-Wynne government. I can tell you under Minister Lecce, things are far worse. You have books in elementary school libraries. There are themes of pedophilia, incest. It's unthinkable, and nothing's being done. I would say that that's only gone worse. And the word I keep hearing is the B word, betrayal. What happened to Doug Ford? What happened to the PC party? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure what's happened, but I hear the same thing. I hear that from my constituents, and one of the things that they tell me is that Doug Ford is not a conservative, and that concerns them. And there's so much that I could go on here, but I do hear from parents of our students, and I am a parent of two young people, 22 and 18, and I hear the stories that my son brings home from school, and I also hear from educators, and teachers have a tough job these days. People talk about, right now, well, they're on summer vacation and they're laying around pools and they're doing this, that, and the other. I tell you, I wouldn't want their job. Because their job is no longer to educate our kids. Their job is to be all sorts of things other than an educator.
And I think one thing we learned in the last 5 years is that Doug Ford is not Rob Ford. Doug Ford doesn't seem to be a leader. He seems to be someone being led by people behind the scenes. I'm just wondering, who are those people and what are their agendas? Because it doesn't seem that this is a truly conservative government.
Well, that is what I hear. I hear my constituents say that he's a populist and he's not a conservative. Who's leading him? I have no idea. I guess last year, during leading up to the campaign, I knew who kind of was at the helm, but I have no idea right now who is leading our premier. But we do have to get back to some basics. I said that in my maiden speech, is that I wanted us to do politics differently. We have to do it differently. And I've had, MPPs from all stripes come to me and say, I agree with you, and I'm going to work towards that. Unfortunately, I still see too many on the government side who say, well, I support you, and I wish I could talk like you do. Well, of course you can. Of course you can. It just takes will to do it. It takes will to stand up and say in caucus, you know what? I can't support this. Or guess what? I am going to support that private member's bill of MPP Brady's because it does the right thing for farmland. You just need, the will, the courage to stand up and do it. And yet I don't see too many leaders being courageous these days, and it's frightening. Right now, we're keeping an eye on what's going on out at Nanticoke. We're waiting to hear whether or not the province is going to issue the ministerial zoning order for that property. It's a harebrained idea if they do, because nobody should live in that industrial park or near that industrial park for a number of reasons, and health issues. one of those reasons. And also we need those thousands of good paying jobs that are out there at the industrial park. And when industry says, you know what, I'm not working around 40,000 people, we have to believe them.
Gee, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't one of Doug Ford's slogans, Ontario open for business?
Yeah, we certainly don't want Nanticoke closed for business. And, I asked a town councillor recently, when all these folks move into the area, do they pay for themselves?
Yeah.
And the answer is no. They don't pay for themselves. So, when I talk about courage with leadership, and leadership needs to be courageous, I'm also talking that, our premiers need to start standing up to Justin Trudeau and saying, you know what, when we have critical issues in our healthcare system, when we are failing our kids in our education system, why would we continue to add people to that? Why don't we get our house in order before we continue to add people to the house?
100%. Everything you're saying is common sense to me, Ms. Brady, much like a slogan from a great premier of yesterdecade, Mike Harris, the common sense revolution architect. And but I want to thank you for your time and keep us appraised of this housing development. We'll keep an eye on that. And what can I tell you, folks? What is the moral of the story? I think it's this. Whether it's an ex-NFL quarterback or a current Ontario politician, not really a good idea to bet against somebody with the surname Brady. For Rebel News, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Well, folks, as you know, we don't receive a nickel of Justin Trudeau's media money, nor would we accept it if offered. However, we do depend on you to fund our expenses. Please go to rebelfieldreports.com. That's rebelfieldreports.com. And if you can make a contribution, no matter how small, that would be greatly appreciated.